little bit, or in a little bit, to kind of let people just log on. But while we're waiting, if you want to introduce yourselves in the chat, please share your name, your pronouns, and where you're from. That would be awesome. And so I am Seth Snoap, the Men as Allies coordinator at Resilience, Advocates for Ending Violence in Holland, Michigan. And so what we decided at Resilience is to bring our conversations that we typically do with middle school, high school, and college age boys and bring it to all of you, to just have a conversation about manhood and have a conversation about consent through a male's lens, have a conversation about healthy relationships through a male lens. And so during this conversation, we are going to have most of you muted, just so you can clearly hear our main speakers. But we will be asking questions, and during that, please feel free to use the chat. And then also we're going to have opportunities for you all to share some stories or examples from your own life. And when you want to do that, just type in the chat and let us know, hey, I have a story about this, I would love to share. And then Leslie, my colleague, will unmute you and you'll be able to share. So, like I said, my name is Seth Snoap. If Stephen and Brad, you want to introduce yourselves, because yeah, they're our main speakers for today.
Hey everybody, my name is Brad Heathia. I'm also with Resilience. I'm a trauma therapist there. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm very excited to meet everybody, and thanks for being here.
Awesome. Thanks, Brad.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, my name's Stephen Mika. Yeah, Seth, older brother, and yeah, I was just invited. Him and he as my pronouns, and yeah, father of 4 awesome boys. So excited to be here, and just yeah, looking forward to having a little chat.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. Like I said, as a reminder for all of you new people, this conversation is going to be mostly around what does it mean to be a man. And so we're going to dive into what male culture is, what, you know, the statements act like a man are, all of that stuff. And so that conversation is mainly going to be had between the 3 main speakers, but please feel free to use that chat box whenever you have a question or an example, like I was saying, or some answers to some of our questions. And if you do have a pressing story that you want to share, please let us know, and you are welcome to be unmuted and share that. So let's get started. Raise your hand, or I guess let us know if you've ever heard the statement, act like a man or man up. Yeah, right? Most of us? Great. In some shape or form, men have heard this statement, act like a man or man up. But what I want to talk about today is, what does that mean? What does act like a man mean? And so, Stephen or Brad, do you have any insight to that or something you want to say? What does that 3-word statement really mean? Act like a man. Because it seems to me that everybody says it and everybody knows or seems to know what it means, but no one really talks about what it means. So any thoughts, ideas?
Go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, you know, I think depending on where you come from, especially just your family background and whatnot, it could mean something completely different than what society says. But I think the biggest thing is just society. I mean, you see the Westerns and you know, the action flicks of you got to have bulging muscles. No offense, Seth, or you know, you got to have just that strength, that brawn strength, and be able to lift a car if needed, and you never cry, and yeah, just in all areas, it's just this tough demeanor about you, and you know, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, all these little cliche sayings that you have that you're just kind of pounded with from the get-go. And you know, I catch myself saying it to my kids. I have a 15, 8, 6, and 3-year-old, and there's times where I tell my 6 and 8-year-old, like, hey, you know, you got to man up. Like, I know you fell down, but you know, time's done being crying. So, I mean, act like a man it's just ingrained in us that we have to be tough, and we have to just have this strength about us, and we can't let things affect us. And if they do, let's not talk about how they affect us. Let's just get the job done. Let's get whatever's going on. Let's fix it. Let's move forward with it. And so, yeah, and we have society telling that us over and over again of, you know, just get it done. Don't talk about your feelings. Don't talk about emotions. Just, you know, you can take on anything. You're steel. Go out and do it.
Yeah. I like how you pointed out, even you, like, you know what it means, and even you catch yourself saying it to your own boys, right? I mean, I think most boys can remember a time where they might have fallen down and they started crying. And you always hear that statement, hey, man up, from wherever it is. And you're just like, oh, okay, that means toughen up. I may be bleeding. I might see bone, but I got to toughen up, right?
Right.
Thoughts, Brad? Yeah, I think, Stephen, you did a great job. You listed off a lot of things there. And I think context is really important. There's usually something that we're doing before we hear that phrase. And so I think when we start to feel emotional, when we are hurt or we're sad, that's when we hear man up, we need to be cold, emotionless. When we feel weak, or maybe we're showing something that is said to be weak, we're told to man up. If we're not hypersexual or hypersexualizing women in their bodies, we're told to man up. So it's this policing term, and I know we'll talk about that later, that we use to keep everyone in line so that this system keeps moving forward.
Yeah. I don't know, you were in and out most of the time, but I got the gist of what you were saying. It's that policing term, right? I mean, as male identified in this room, do you remember the first time someone told you to man up? Oh, someone said, my dad recently told my 10-year-old boy to man up. Yeah. And it's this policing term. It's even like sometimes other guys will police other guys' sons, which is a very interesting concept. But I know when I was a boy, and my first time ever hearing man up, it was, I think it was 6 or 7, but it was the same. I was out probably doing something stupid, and I got hurt, and I had a gash from like here to here, and I was just bleeding profusely and crying. And so I came to the house, obviously distraught because I was bleeding, and the first thing that was told me was man up, right? If you don't see the bone, walk it off. And I can see Stephen laughing because that was a saying in our house. If you don't see bone, walk it off. And so what is that really teaching me about what it means to be a man? Like, how am I supposed to walk off a gash in my arm when I'm 6 years old? And so another person, the good news is that my son's jaw dropped and told his grandpa, that is offensive to girls. That's awesome. Yeah, just like, oh, that's really cool. The fact that you were like, no, that's not okay. Oh, I love to see that. But I guess I'm going to ask Stephen and Brad this. When you were told to man up, how did that make you feel?
Yeah, I'm from my standpoint. Yeah, like you touched on it, that notion of if it's not bleeding or broken, it shouldn't affect. Oh, Brad, you're talking. We lose Brad. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that like it develops like a sense of not being able to talk through things whatsoever. And that, again, it goes to that whole, you have to be tough and you can't even express when, hey, I have a gash on my arm or my bone's not broken, so it shouldn't hurt. And so, again, you just have to be, have this tough exterior and this manly type of, I don't know, I could lose a finger and it shouldn't even affect me. But then it sets the precedent in what happens when something even lesser than that takes place. Like, then I really don't have to talk about it. What happens if my feelings get hurt? How do I do that? Well, no, I don't say anything about it, so I internalize it. And then once you internalize it, then it explodes in other areas, and then you're left with anger or running to substances or not being able to talk through just simple things that us as human beings should talk about. And, being trained that way, you almost have this idea of, well, if I can't talk about my feelings, then if I inflict pain on other people, then it should be okay because they shouldn't have to talk about their feelings because they don't have a broken bone or they don't have a gash. So therefore it kind of diminishes the effect of how you treat people as well, because you kind of numbs you to it. Like I shouldn't talk about this, so why should anybody else talk about when they're feeling?
Yeah, I love the fact how you brought it back to, it numbs you.
Yeah.
It numbs you to not only your own feelings, but it numbs you to other people's feelings. And so I think that comes back to, like, it teaches us to not value empathy, and it teaches us to do it alone, right? Like, so you have a gash in your arm. Well, go get a bandage, wrap up your own arm, and then suck it up by yourself. Exactly. Which then, I guess it leads to, and you can do this in the chat, or you can just give me a thumbs up. I know you can do that in Zoom. How many of you have heard of the man box? Yeah, a few. Awesome. Okay. For those of you who don't know what it is, sweet, more people. Great. For those of you who don't know what it is, it's essentially society's how-to manual to be a guy, right? Welcome back, Brad. But we're just talking about the man box, and how it's basically how to be a man 101 in society's eyes. It's the collective socialization of manhood. It's these, stereotypical rigid expectations that society values in men. And so I guess what I want for us to start thinking about is, if we can think of the man box, if we can picture the man box, what kind of stuff would go in it? And so what I usually do with my middle school and high school boys is I ask them, close your eyes and think of the manliest man in the world. The toughest of the tough, the realest of the real. And I ask, what does this guy look like? What does this guy talk like? What activities does he like? So that's what I want us to do. So you don't have to close your eyes, but just what would go into this man box? What are the stereotypical behaviors and activities and physical appearance of, quote unquote, a real guy? Doesn't cry? Oh, absolutely, right? A real man never cries. And if they do, they either cry alone or they cry at a funeral. Those are like the two areas that guys are allowed to show emotion. We got from Robert, tall, white, dark hair. Yeah, we see that all the time. I get over 6 foot, all hyper masculine. Awesome. Could you explain hypermasculine a little bit more in the chat? Provides completely for family. Love it. If someone challenges you, be aggressive back. Oh, absolutely. You never back down from a fight, right? That's what I get. You got to puff your chest up. You got to throw your shoulders back. You got to get ready for a fight. Doesn't ask for help. That's a big one. If you're a man, if you're a man's man, you go it alone. And we'll get into that in a little bit, but they have to be tough, aggressive, having power and control over women and men, fearless. Yeah, the big thing is having power and control. We have to be in control all the time. And if we're not, we're seen as less of a man. Muscle cars, yes, you got to be a car guy. I get that a lot. You have to like cars, or if you have to know cars, or at least know how to fix an engine. Provider, love it. Jobs in construction, yeah, or just working with your hands, right? I get a lot of the times, real men aren't nurses. Real men aren't teachers. And I know some great male nurses. One of my best friends is a stellar male nurse. And yet, even in the nurse field, some people don't see him as a manly man, just because the job he does. Macho, aggressive, obsessed with position as a man. Yes. For some reason, in the man box, they want you to prove your manliness and say, no, like, I'm manlier than so-and-so. Well, I do this. I play football, so I'm manlier than this guy. And it's kind of like this hierarchy of manly power. Jobs in leadership, in business, yeah. You got to be the CEO, for sure. Be the man. Yeah. Have to be attracted to women. Absolutely. If you're a real man, you can't be homosexual. And overtly sexual too, for sure. And if you're not, then you're seen as either gay or other things, which we'll talk about. You have to be straight, right? You have to be promiscuous, absolutely. You have to want to have sex all the time with anyone. You have to degrade women, yes. You have to view women as lesser than men, right? And you have to view things that are stereotypically feminine as weak. Degrade other men, absolutely. We were talking about how act like a man is a policing term. And so you have to degrade other men to become more powerful. Like we were talking about that hierarchy of manliness. It's like we have to prove how manly we are 24/7. Drugs and alcohol are acceptable. Fighting is always an option. Intimidation of other men proves how much of a man you really are. Yeah, wear dark clothes. Yes. I am clearly not the example of the man box right now. And even wear pink. I was wearing pink, a year ago, downtown GR. And all of these dudes were coming up to me and were like, oh man, you got to have some stones to be wearing pink. And I'm like, why? Like, it's springtime. I like pink. It's a good color. Like, it makes my eyes pop. Like, I don't care. Yeah, other thoughts, Stephen and Brad. What goes in this man box?
I think for me, one of the big words is violence, right? A lot of the things that we saw in the chat box are very aggressive, and violence is a pillar of masculinity. You either have to be the toughest person at your job, or the toughest person at school, or the toughest person in your family. But toughness, violence, aggression, that's what being a real man looks like. And we see it everywhere in media, in film, magazines, sports. Masculinity and violence, they go hand in hand.
Yeah, absolutely. I love how you said that. It's like, I mean, look at the sports that real men play. It's not soccer. It's not tennis. It's not golf, even though those are
Sports.
very hard sports.
Yeah.
Like, my golf game is trash.
Yeah.
But the sports we do value are football, hockey, basketball, the more violent and physical sports.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Thoughts, Stephen? I think you're muted.
Yeah, sorry, I have a 3-year-old running around, so I want to mute as much as I can when I'm not talking. No, I think the biggest one for me and all the stuff that I've gone through in my life is just really the notion that you have to handle life on your own. And that leads to, again, putting all the feelings that you have and never sharing them, to lead to almost just you walk around apathetic, other than anger. Like, you can express anger, you can express that you're upset, especially if you're pinpointing that anger towards, well, I'm angry at sports. Now I'm going to go crush that guy. That's okay. But outside of that, any other emotion that you share is looked at as being almost weak. And so, yeah, I think it just leads to isolation, because you don't want to open up, you don't want to share. I think one of the biggest things as men that is huge in our nation is the fact that our relationships with other men are just so horrible, because we're afraid to share how we feel. And so, again, you pen up all of those emotions, and the only emotion that comes out is anger, because that's the one that's easily expressed. And so if you get to it, and going into my psychology background here, but I mean, anger is, it's just the bottle that explodes after a while. And that's just the symptoms of something so much deeper inside of your heart that you're dealing with and not sharing. And so, yeah, that isolation and feeling like you have to take on the world. I mean, such a heavy burden that we put on ourselves because we can't share it. And we, yeah, just lead to just different areas.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's like society teaches men to be lonely. It pushes men to be lonely,
Yeah.
right? It pushes us to push others away and not have that connection we need. I like how someone pointed out, oddly, in the gaming world, to be overtly competent. Agreed. Like it, and that's something I see a lot with, especially with the high schoolers and middle schoolers, is if you're not good at a game, it makes you less of a man. Like, if I'm not good at Call of Duty or Fortnite or whatever, it makes you less of a man. And that logically doesn't make sense. A lot of this logically doesn't make sense. And also, something we didn't touch on is men. We talked about it a little bit. Men have to be promiscuous, but also men have to be quote unquote good, right? We get that a lot. And a lot of the high school boys and middle school boys don't know what that really means, but they feel that pressure, that outside pressure of being good at sexual acts when no one is going to actually talk to them about what's healthy and what's not. And we'll get into that in a few weeks, but that's something else also. I like what Kelly said. Encourage reliance on one person for emotional vulnerability. Almost always a woman, be it a friend, mom, or partner. And also making fun of women for having wider emotional friend circles. And I love how you pointed that out, because as these rigid rules and expectations push us to become lonelier and not have relationships with other men, it also pushes us to find that one person that we can kind of just dump on, right? To show us the emotional vulnerability we lack. And yeah, oh, I love that. Absolutely. Any thoughts, Brad? Anything to add?
Well, I think there's something really important there about how there's this pressure to kind of ridicule anyone who is emotional, but yet, like she said, we find somebody that we rely on so that we can be emotional, but it's only for that one person. So it's almost like we wear this mask where in front of other people, we're this way, we're cold, we don't show emotion, we're hard, we're tough. But then we also, when we can take that mask off, we desperately try and find someone in our life that we can open up to and can rely on. But it's just so difficult because you're living two lives. You're living a public life and you're living a private life. And that's not healthy for you, and it's not healthy for everybody around you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I can speak to that personally. Is in high school, I was in this man box, right? I mean, Stephen can probably attest to that, but I was the jerk jock who everyone loved, and I loved myself even more. And yet every day I would wake up and I felt like I had to put on that mask, and I would come home and be a completely different person.
Yep.
And so my next question, and this kind of leads into the next portion of the conversation, if this man box is essentially how society wants men to be, is it more unhealthy or healthy for us men? Is this man box a truly healthy thing or a truly unhealthy thing? Yeah, either way, I mean, Stephen, Brad, any thoughts? Totally unhealthy. Love it.
Yeah, I think for me, when I think about the man box today, I see it as two things. I see one, it's a weapon that's used against other people, specifically, women or non-masculine folks, non-binary folks, trans folks. It's a weapon used against them to hurt them, to abuse them, to silence them. But it's also a prison for us as men as well, where, like Stephen said earlier, there's this loneliness that we feel trapped. We wear this mask, like Seth was just talking about. We're one person in public, we're another person at home. And we feel like we can never be our true self. We can never break out of it because of all the policing that's done on a societal level. So I think it's two things, twofold. One, it's a weapon against others, but it's also a prison that we suffer in as well.
Absolutely. I like how you compared it to a prison. Yeah. Leslie, could you unmute Stephen? Thanks. Awesome.
Yeah, I like in the comments someone said part of it is healthy. And I think a lot of it goes to that notion of everything in little bits is good. I mean, even like a donut here or there is good, but if you have a whole, you know, um, daily supply of donuts as your only food, then you're not going to be the healthiest. So I think as a whole, if you look at stats of alcoholism to domestic violence to just even talking to adolescents these days about what it means to be a man, I mean, you can see that the expectations that our society is putting on men is quite high and quite unhealthy because of the levels that they're at. And yeah, I mean, it's something that's just built into the society for whatever reason. And there's things out there that can counter it. And obviously there's a progressive movement to, go against what we feel as if that, 50s and 60s type of man that's working on a car, smoking a cigarette while drinking a beer. But at the same point, like, I think it's just that natural ingrained in us. And I think what stems it all is just our pride. And from a young age, I know for myself, you develop this pride in things you do. And like even going to be an adult, going from like my pride in sports or my pride in who I was dating or how many girls I was dating at that time, now it goes into, hey, is my yard looking good compared to my neighbors? Hey, am I providing for my family? And so that pride aspect kicks in. And I think that's where it becomes unhealthy, because if your main drive is the pride to look good, to meet these standards that are in full unhealthy, then being in that man box completely and utterly trying to live up to those things in that man box every day, I think it's just going to lead to destruction, and it's going to lead to the stats we see throughout society.
Well said. Yeah, I didn't even consider the pride aspect of the man box, right? We're taught as men to be proud of being in that man box. And like Brad, you were saying, it then becomes a prison. It becomes a prison policed by other men, but also policed by ourselves. Because if we aren't proud in what we do, then that's going to eat us alive. And I love how most people are pointing out that there are a lot of healthy things about manhood. There are. Men have the capacity for so much love and so much compassion and so much empathy. And it's just, unfortunately, those things are pushed down in like to the bottom, and these unhealthy things are raised to the top and valued a lot more in society's eyes. And I think that just is so frustrating and confusing for a lot of young men, because they want to be compassionate, they want to show empathy, they want to have close guy friends, yet society's telling them, well, then you're not really a real guy, because real men don't do that. And so it's this push and pull to like polar opposite sides, and young men these days, I think, are really confused and have a lot of questions, and people are just not having conversations with them. So they're pulled into this man box because basically 90% of what's around them is pulling them towards the man box, and that 10% is trying its hardest to pull back, but over the policing and the pride and the media and all of this, they just get trapped, like you said, in this prison. And so my next question is if this man box is so unhealthy and it seems like a prison and we can't escape it, Robert said the man box is very narrow and rigid, and meeting all those expectations is basically impossible. Absolutely. Men aren't born coming out with a 12-pack, a beer, liking cars, want to go hunting, like want to degrade women. They're not born like that. They learn that. And so my next question is, where do we learn all these rules and expectations from? Where does this man box come from? Because it's got to come from somewhere.
Yeah, I think from my standpoint, I know that a lot of it, I mean, it could come from your family and upbringing, and you touched on it earlier, you know, just the whole how we were raised to, if it's not broken or bleeding, man up, you're fine. But outside of that, like from television to movies, I mean, you either see that the husband and father is a complete idiot, like Simpsons, for example, or you go the opposite and they are like put on a pedestal, and that they're like the strongest and the most athletic, and they know everything about cars, and like you could come to them with any problem that they have and they could fix it. And so from that standpoint, that's what you're seeing, and that's what you're like, oh man, that's what I have to be when or you look at posters and you see the guy again outside working on his car, smoking a cigarette and having a beer, and that's what it is. Or guys get together for a game day. That's how I was brought up. Like tailgates were a huge thing. It was almost like a religion. That Saturdays before Michigan football, if we were at the games or we're not, it was, let's get together, we'll talk. It's a little more freeing because there's no women around, so you can get a little more dicey with what you're saying. And there's always alcohol involved. And so it's just those things that you pick up. And I mean, I've been going to Michigan football games since I was like 8 years old. And so to see that at such a young age and to hear that you just have that kind of external factors all around you pointing to the man box and pointing to, this is what is okay and this is what guys do. Now, when you grow up, fit into that. And so I grew up thinking, and at a very young age, I had to drink as soon as I can because that's the cool thing. Drink and be with as many women as I could. And I mean, that goes into the man box again. We touched on it, promiscuity and alcoholism. That was just running rampant when I grew up because that's what I knew. That's what I saw just growing up.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of you are saying parents, grandparents, movies, friends are a big thing, especially in young males' lives. I like how Cynthia said mothers are a big part of it. As a social worker, I see moms and babies, and I hear those moms tell male babies and toddlers not to cry and to act like men. So not only do we have men policing men, now we have women policing men as well. Brad, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think everybody's doing a great job talking about the personal side, the micro side of things. I'd like to talk a little bit about the macro or the systems level. And when we look at our country, we see all of these systems that are working together, right? We see our political system, our economic system, our social systems. They're all part of this giant machine that is our culture. And to me, the man box is like the grease that keeps the gears turning smoothly. Our political structure is dominated by masculinity. Capitalism is dominated by masculinity and aggressiveness, competition. Our social structure, our marriage, patriarchy, dominated by masculinity. White supremacy, homophobia, these are all very masculine man box traits. And so the idea of the man box and policing is to keep that system running smoothly. And we have to have a certain type of man to do that. One that doesn't ask questions, one that's just focused on self, one that doesn't care about other people's feelings, one that's aggressive and violent and competitive. And so we force men, and we police ourselves too into doing this so that we can keep the system running as is. This is how it was designed. This type of man box is not new. This is thousands of years of manhood in the making. And it's done on purpose with intent to reap economic, political, and social benefits. the thing that a lot of people don't see is that a lot of these micro examples, parents, grandparents, friends, family, they all are part of the system too, even if they may not realize it. And we gain privilege and benefits and safety, at least we're perceived to gain those things from the system. So we try and protect it and perpetuate the system instead of challenging it. So that's kind of where I'm at. It is individual, but it's also very systemic as well.
Yeah, thank you. Both very well put. I like what CJ had to add. Religion is also a big contributor. It's how we learn morality and how we interpret gender norms. And those norms have been morphed and intensified over time and even gone away from the original intention of those religious norms. So thank you for that addition, CJ. And so I guess my reaction is, because this man box is basically hammered into us from day one, from either individual factors or systemic factors, it's all around us, right? And so to say that, and I'm probably going to generalize, but to say that if not every guy has a certain type of man box, I think it would be a pretty safe generalization. And so if every guy has a man box in some shape or form, what are the consequences of living into what this man box is telling us to live into? If we say, you know what, I'm going to go 100% into this man box, I'm going to live into 100% of what everyone around me is telling me what a man should be, I'm going to live into that. What are the consequences of doing that? I guess I can share a personal story, just because that's how I am. I'm authentic, I'm open, I'm vulnerable. But junior year of college, I went from jerk athlete in high school to jerk athlete in college to jerk frat star in college. So there were levels of like, oh, he's in the man box, now he's deeper in the man box, now he is a man box. And I realize that now, and junior year is when it kind of broke for me, because I realized that I pushed everyone away because either I was sexist, rude, aggressive, cocky. I thought basically the sun revolved around me. I drank alcohol way too much, and I pushed people away, like even my closest friends. And I was alone. And I basically didn't go to school. I didn't get up out of my bed for months at a time. I would get up, I would turn on my TV, and I would play video games, and then I'd go to bed. And like, I would drink by myself, and like other people around me were concerned, yes, and they like tried to talk to me, but I wouldn't let them in. And like junior year was rough for me because I almost dropped out of college because of it. And thankfully, one of my friends basically snapped me out of it. And like that kind of snapped me out of my man box. And without that initial conversation, I think my life would be drastically different, because I would still be living into that man box. I would still be living into those consequences because I was alone. I had no one to talk to. I had no motivation. I was abusing substances. And so that's just my personal experience with living into the man box. Holly says, self-destructive behavior potentially, and not the most healthy of relationships with others. Oh, that was you, Leslie? Absolutely. And yeah, any thoughts, ideas, Brad, Stephen?
Yeah, I think that the more you get into trying to live up to standards in the man box, the more self-centered you become. And I totally agree that most of the relationships are unhealthy with people because they are strictly there for your own pleasure, your own, I fill in that word. It's just all about you. And I say that from my own standpoint of, as I grew up, that's what it was. It was my world and other people were living in it. And if you were my friend, it was because I needed you around. It got to the point where even after marriage, I went into it and my wife pretty much had to meet my expectations. If not, we were in a fight and an argument. And it was because I couldn't share anything until the anger came out. And then I was talking about things that happened when we were dating 5 years before because I just penned it all up. And alcohol played a huge role in that too, to numb everything that was going on. And you become this person that is so focused on getting your needs and desires met. When they aren't met, it's almost explosive because you can't understand. Again, I'm speaking for myself. I couldn't understand why people weren't bending over backwards for me, why people weren't meeting what I was putting on them without even telling them that's the expectation that I was wondering. So a lot of it, thanks to God, it hit me that I needed to be more humble. And that's why I hit on the pride earlier, because my big issue in life is pride, and that I want to have my life be put on a pedestal because I think I'm awesome. And now I think I'm pretty the opposite, that I am an idiot, and that's okay with me because it made me learn a lot of things in my 34 years on this planet. And looking back, I just would say that my life was a boat that I was looking out on the beautiful blue water. Everything was perfect in front of me, but if you turn around, there's a wake of destruction of everybody in my life was just in there because I wasn't paying attention to anything but me.
Thank you for that. Brad, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think what Stephen said was really powerful, and how pride has been a really difficult thing for him because of the man box. And for me, I would say, vulnerability was the toughest thing for me when I was in my man box. I had a rough childhood. I experienced a lot of abuse, and I didn't tell anybody for 12 years. I went through school, relationships. No one would have ever guessed that my home life was not good, was not healthy, because I was so afraid of people knowing. I was so afraid of people seeing the real me. I refused to be vulnerable. I refused to be authentic. I put this mask on and I covered all that up because, the number one rule of the man box, you can't be weak. And I thought that my experience being hurt, my feelings of hurt, my pain was weakness. And so I did everything I could to hide it. And so the biggest consequence for me living in the man box was experiencing so much shame and silence around what was going on and who I really am. I was just so afraid of being the real me. And as a result, my relationships with people suffered. I didn't go too deep. I didn't open up. I didn't hang out with people outside of school. I went heavy into sports, football especially, so I could just grind and beat the crap out of people because I was so angry. But that's not me. That's not who I am. And so my biggest consequence was I was so afraid of being me. And it wasn't until I surrounded myself in college with better people, with feminists and women, people of color, that they weren't afraid of being vulnerable and being their true self. And, they were role models and saved me in many ways. So I think, my biggest thing moving forward is every day trying to be vulnerable and trying to be authentic, letting people see who you are, being emotional and knowing that that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, both of you. I know Beth Larson said, I wonder if it's more about insecurity than being overly boastful and self-absorbed. And I mean, personally, I can speak to that too, because a lot of my self-absorption was because of insecurities. And so because I felt insecure about my manhood, I had to basically be the polar opposite and the hyper masculine person I was, because people can't see me being insecure. People cannot see me being weak. People cannot see me doubting myself. People cannot see me not being the best. And because of that insecurity, I solidified myself into my man box. And I pushed my man box on other people to say, look, I'm not insecure. I got it down. I'm look at me, I'm a man. And so thank you for that reminder. So how can we help the men in our lives step out of the man box? Love it. You were thinking ahead. We'll get there. Don't worry, but we will get there. So my next question is, if it is so unhealthy and so stressful and taxing to be in this prison, why do we live into it? Like, how are men pushed into this man box if clearly, if we really actually think about it, it's pretty unhealthy? How are men pushed so far into their man box that they feel like they can't escape?
Yeah, I think, it's important to, again, remember that this is a system that grants power and privilege. And power and privilege, is so impactful if you have it. It can make your life so much easier. It can open doors. It can create safety. It can give you so many things. And so I think a lot of men, because they want those benefits, they want that safety, security, they want that financial power, right? They'll stay in the man box, even though it's crushing them in their humanity, because it's providing some of these things that we're taught. This is the only way we can get that. And so if that's what we believe, if we believe what we're taught by society and our culture, that's probably why we stay in the box for a long time. Even though we know it's hurting us and it's hurting other people, we selfishly want the privilege that it gives us.
Yeah. Well said. I know Ray said it's easier to see or accept each other the way it is, since, like we said earlier, the majority of men fall into this man box. So there's power in numbers, right? But that could also be a negative, unhealthy thing. Safety is a huge thing to keep the system in place, right? Stephen, any thoughts? I mean, my thoughts are, you basically, we all know the words, right? We all know the words that are said to guys who step out of this man box. I'm not going to go into them, but they're said all the time, constantly. Video game chats, literally in the class while I'm there talking about this stuff. It's there, it's prevalent, and it's kind of destructive. And unfortunately, like, I bought into that too. Because once you're in the man box, in order to solidify yourself into the man box, you have to start policing others to join the system. And yeah, and once we really start talking about it, you can see how unhealthy it is. But the power that basically act like a man has, or man up, like, the power those statements have over us men is ridiculous and very destructive. So and this is where we're going to talk about how to break out of it. If this man box is all around us. It's what society values. Other guys are policing other men. Women are policing men into this man box. It's pervasive. It's everywhere. It's unhealthy. How do we men break out of it? Stop policing and call out those who police. Yes, I love it. Other thoughts? Any thoughts, Brad, Steven? How do we break out of our man box? Even though basically society and everyone around us is saying, whoa, 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 whoa. No, you stay in your man box.
Right. I think it's finding, I mean, like as a society, we all strive to find our own identity. And I think it's easier to put yourself into the mass group of, I can obtain these things as a man because this is how I should be. And it's harder to go against the grain than just go into it. And so recognizing your identity and really, yeah, I mean, calling it out, not being a part of it. I mean, from as something as so little as when you hear maybe a dirty joke at work, school, wherever you are, like not calling it out in a judgmental way, but being able to just be like, man, it's not something that I do, or just because that's your identity, that's who you are. You don't fall into that. Is it easy? Absolutely. It's easier to laugh at the joke or even tell the joke on. But I think if we have a strong enough identity and whatever you find your identity in, you know, those are the characteristics that you want to show to people. And a lot of it starts with just you showing who you are and based on your character going against what is normal. And it's hard. And I'm not taking away from that, because being meek, being humble, being these things that are counter to being a man is hard, because you will get that backlash. You will get people that will make fun of you just because you're not doing it. And so that's where you being safe in who you are and your identity helps those. And so being that light to people, showing them, hey, this isn't who I am. I don't want to go into that. Treating people, especially treating women, with the respect they deserve. I mean, that alone is countercultural to what is on TV or websites you go to. Like, I mean, that's a small step that you can go, and the fact of you can be committed in a relationship and treat your treat your significant other with just respect. I mean, just those small things that you can do to step out. And I don't think it's a light switch you turn on and off, but I think it's something that you can do diligently each and every day to just kind of walk in there and understand that there will be backslides, just because it's easier to go along and use manhood as a crutch and be like, well, I'm a man, this is how I should act.
Oh, but I like how you pointed out how it's not like a light switch you can flip on and off. And it's not like a light switch where you can just flip it on and then leave it on. It's a light switch where you have to flip it on, make sure the light bulb's screwed in tight. If it goes out, you have to screw in another one. It's a constant, lifelong journey of, hey, I have to break out of this. I have to remind myself each and every day to break out of this. And it doesn't have to be by one giant step forward, but it can be those little steps. And those little steps add up, and they add up quickly. Thoughts, Brad?
Yeah. I think that was really well said. You know, for me, understanding that the man box, traditional masculinity, it's really all about fear, right? We're afraid of being vulnerable. We're afraid of being seen as weak. It's all about fear. So what we need to have is we need to have a counter story, somebody that we can look at that will give us kind of hope that it's possible to break out. So the dominant narrative of masculinity, we see that everywhere, right? Seth, you talked about it, the hyper masculine dude in all of the movies, sports, all that. The counter narrative is a man that has stepped out of the man box and is living life and is loving life and is kind of a teacher, somebody that is a mentor, a role model, that can kind of show us we can do this. It is possible, because we're so afraid, right? It all goes back to fear. We're so afraid of stepping out of the box. We need to see like it is possible, and we need to see that there's benefits. And so when we see a counter story, somebody who is out of the man box and they're loving life and they're making a huge impact and they're being a great father, they're being a great employee or whatever they're doing, that's what kind of allows us to say, I want that, and now I know it's possible. So I'm going to do my best now to be courageous and be vulnerable and authentic and try and get there too.
Yeah. I love that word, authenticity. That's what I always talk about with my middle school and high school boys, is authenticity. Because we've been talking about it constantly, is that mask, right? We wear that mask of masculinity, and that mask isn't who we are. It's underneath that mask is who we are. And so what I always talk about is, why do you feel the need to put on that mask? You know how liberating it is to not have to put on that mask and actually be your authentic self? And both of you hit on this. It takes courage to do that, because you will get backlash. You will. I get it constantly, even today, even from my high school boys that I'm talking to. Like, you will. But having that courage to know your identity and know your authentic self enough to break out of the man box and be a healthier version of who you want to be. And I like how you said, be an example. Be an example to, your kids or the people you work with, or just the men around you in your life. And I know, Stephen, you're a dad of 4 boys. How do you show them what it means to be a man, I guess? How are you that example?
That's a loaded question.
Yeah, sorry. I know. I had to pull it out.
A lot of it is what I do on a day-to-day basis. Obviously, faith is a big thing for me in our household. And so the way I look at it is, first and foremost, how I treat their mom. It goes against that notion of she's property, or she's only there to cook, clean, and do the housework for me. It's a constant, you are my helper. You assist me, and without you, I will be honest, I'm lost. She picks out my clothes at times. So she is my better half, and I will tell that to everybody and anybody. But just how I treat her and show her love, and never talking bad, never arguing with her in front of the kids is a huge thing. As I have one trying to point a gun at me currently. but through that, and then the ability to say I'm sorry or I messed up is one that I'm really working with them, because from a young age we're taught that we should never say we're sorry, or we messed up, or we have to be perfect. And so for me to tell them, hey, I messed up, this is how I messed up, can you forgive me? Like, next time I will do better. To have that talk with them so they understand that, 1, it's okay that they mess up because no one's perfect. And then 2, to be able to be open and say, and I messed up, can you forgive me for that? It's just reinforcing to them that the world is not revolving around you, that there's other people in it, and those other people have thoughts and feelings too, and what you do affects them. And so those are just 2 things off the top of my head that I try to do. I would hope to say there's more, but like I said, I have a 3-year-old running around that's shooting Nerf bullets at me currently. So
yeah, sorry to put you on the spot, but not really, because that was awesome. So I guess to finish up this conversation, A lot of people were talking about have healthy and authentic conversations about manhood, but also let's talk about the benefits of breaking out of the man box. We talked about the consequences of living into it. What are some benefits of living that vulnerable, authentic manhood that we all want to live into?
I think, for me, I'm a therapist, and so like mental health is really important. And I see a lot of men, and I was in there too, when you live in the man box, your mental health really suffers. So if you're able to break out of the man box, you use the word liberating. I also think it's very healing. You're able to be more human. You're able to feel more than just two emotions. You're able to look at yourself in the mirror and actually accept who you are. You're able to have relationships that are powerful and deep and emotional and meaningful. There's so many benefits to it. But on a mental health kind of level, it's incredibly healing. Um, it's not toxic anymore. You can talk to a counselor, or you can talk to your friend, and you can open up. You can do self-care activities. You can go get a massage. You can go do mindfulness or yoga. Like, you can do these things that a traditional right man or in the man box they would never do. So it's just so much healthier for you emotionally and mentally, spiritually, and it can be incredibly healing and transformative.
Absolutely. And I know, and less violence against women and men. Absolutely. If we value compassion and empathy and understanding and communication rather than aggression, dominance, anger, never back down from a fight, it's logically we're going to see less violence, and especially less violence against women, because if we shatter the notion that women are of lesser value than men, like the man box portrays, then we're going to see them as equals, right? We're going to see everybody as equals. No one is more superior than the others. And that leads to so many great positive things. It leads to conversations about consent. That leads to conversations about sexual harassment. That leads to being an ally. That leads to being an active bystander. Breaking out of the man box leads you to be more pro-social and care about the ones around you rather than just yourself. What do you think, Stephen? Benefits of breaking out of the man box?
Yeah, I think Brad hit it on the head. Just the emotional, spiritual gains of everything. I just feel like it's a weight that's taken off, that you have this image or a standard that you have to live up to, that one is impossible to meet and impossible to meet on a daily basis. And once you meet it in some small capacity, it kind of leads to destruction anyway. So once you kind of turn from there and you're able to really get rid of those feelings, get rid of these standards that I have to be, and more true to yourself, then you have that freeing feeling, and then you can talk to others and have those relationships that are actually healthy, and they're there, and you can surround yourself with people that you can be open and vulnerable with, because life is hard, and no matter what stage you're in. I have a teenager that he talks to me about things, and I finally reached the age that I no longer know artists and video games that are coming out, so I feel old. So, I mean, I just encourage him all the time, like, find a group of friends that you can talk with about life, that understand, but be conscious of who you're surrounding yourself with, because they might be the ones striving to be in that man box. They might be the ones leading them into that, and it just puts you in that prison that Brad talked about earlier. And so I feel like being free of the man box leaves you the ability to be open and vulnerable and go against this idea that nothing can bother you because there's daily issues that you deal with, and you just have emotions, no matter if you're male or female. So
Yeah, both. That I think freedom is what I keep coming back to. Is just breaking out of the man box. Is like you said, that weight off your shoulders, that first breath of fresh air, because that man box is so suffocating and rigid. Like because I broke out of my man box, and I continue to try and break out of those smaller man boxes. Each and every day I try and push my friends to do it. And we were at a bachelor party, and I love this story, but we were at a bachelor party and we were drinking and having fun. And I sat everybody down and I was just like, okay, let's go around the circle and say why we love Ben was his name, why we love Ben, and like why he means so much to us. And so we sat for like 3 hours just sitting around a circle, like telling each other how much we loved each other and how much we mean to each other. And like people were crying, and it was awesome. And it felt freeing and normal and healthy. And it's just like, that's what the man box takes away. It takes away those connections and that authenticity and that true friendship. And so I whenever I think of breaking out of the man box, I think of that. Just like 10 dudes sitting around a circle telling each other, you know what, I love you so much. I'm glad we're friends. And here's why I love you. And so, yeah. I guess any questions from anyone about the man box, benefits, consequences, where it comes from, more resources, feel free to let Leslie know. You can unmute yourself or we can unmute you, but we have some time right now to answer any questions you might have. I'm an open book, so if you want to know more about my journey to break out of the man box, feel free to ask. Yeah. If there are no questions, I just want to thank you for being part of this conversation. I know it is in the middle of the week, and I know I get tired in the middle of the week, but it's an important conversation to have. And so I do truly appreciate your time. I appreciate your feedback. I saw the chat was blowing up, so thank you so much for being part of it. And I want to encourage everybody to either go to our Facebook page or go to our website. Yeah, perfect. Awesome. Thanks, Leslie. You can visit our websites at resilienceMI.org. There's a few blogs to just go along with this conversation, but also there is a PDF to a guided conversation outline. So if someone missed this conversation, or if you just want to continue the conversation by yourself or with others around you, we have step-by-step instructions on basically how to have this conversation, but at your home. And so thank you again for being here. I'm going to plug next week. Next week, we're going to be here, same time, but we're going to be talking about consent and what consent truly means in the lives of men and the lives around us. Thank you again for coming. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Leslie. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. My email and number are on our website in our Engaging Men page. So yes, stay safe, stay healthy this coming week. And thanks again. Awesome.